I'm quite pale again. I sort of go from very pale back to some colour, back to very pale, back to some colour. I wonder why the condition fluctuates like that. Unusual, isn't it? Anyway, so I do sleep beside a road, so that probably doesn't help with the fumes in the room and things of that nature. But I was here for 2 years before and it wasn't an issue, so no. Maybe it's not. So the point I want to make in this video, praise God, is that this life really is a test. Because when you consider that this world, this temporary realm, temporal, temporary, not forever world, has some problems that help the ones that would reason against everlasting life to make their point. I'm actually getting better and more clearer and better able to articulate what I'm thinking and to put it into words. I suppose that just comes with your own personal development and clarity. So as you get cleaner, then your vessel, your brain, the whole lot is able to communicate because the channels are clearer. You're better able to communicate and just practice as well. But it just goes to show how much of your development can be hindered by alcohol and drugs and just not sort of communicating. Because these videos, you know, you could say that I'm talking to myself most of the time, and most of the time I'm probably talking to a rather reduced audience and only for a fraction of the length of the video because I make long videos. But what this does is it enables me to process my thoughts, and that of course gets me, it's like training for preaching because it teaches you to more succinctly communicate a message. Now the gospel's not reliant upon that, but certainly the exposing of corruption is. When you have to succinctly and concisely, it's easy for you to say, communicate a message. And so that's the point. The point is that you're better able to communicate compound ideas in a few words. And that's what the Bible is amazing at. But it requires, you see, the Bible requires the desire to unpack it. Because a lot of its teachings are by deduction. That means you have to spend some time with it. It also says that you need supernatural counsel, which leads you to the counsel of deduction. So there's a counsel of deduction. It's like something leading you to what's between the lines, but not necessarily concealed. And that can also depend upon your own academic or intellectual development. But in the same way, it doesn't require it if you have the counsel of deduction. So the counsel of deduction is like a decoding, because you can extrapolate what isn't immediately obvious by thinking on it. So there has to be a commitment. And so only if you're seeking shall you find, because it's by deduction that you'll find it. And often that's why I believe that God asks questions a lot of a person seeking knowledge. It's like, because you might think initially, I'm the one asking the questions. You know, you've ever heard that statement, I'm the one asking the questions here. It's like sometimes a question followed by a question leads you to the answer by intuition. You see, God is the one that gives you any knowledge that you have. So it's not like you're asking me a question. Unless, of course, you're asking me a question in the role of preacher and I'm responding in the role of preacher, then I have the counsel of the Lord very powerfully with me. Or if I'm being accused, I have his counsel very powerfully with me to refute or disprove that accusation. So God is with me anyway, but he's also with every human. So because God is the one who counsels you or gives you any ability to reason or think, or intellect, intelligence, or just conscience, because conscience is sort of spiritual, isn't it? Because conscience is unexplained knowing. It's not explained by anything necessarily that you've been exposed to in life. And the world tries to explain away these things in a way. And the world leads you to make assumptions. Because in your making of an assumption, it's the arresting of finding the answer. Because you've made an assumption about something and haven't gone to seek it out. So that you don't need to make the assumption, but can rather know it to be the case. So those who want to keep you from knowledge will command you or lead you to make an assumption. And currently our government in Ireland are leading the people to presume things constitutional, such that they've even coined a phrase, presumptively constitutional. Presumptively constitutional? Yeah, assume this is constitutional. Well, what does that do? It tells you not to bother checking whether it is or it isn't. And even if you do, you still have to treat it as though it is constitutional by command of the current government. Well, that's usurpation, it's occupancy and sedition. Basically mean they're overthrowing the government and doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be, or the opposite of what is even reasonable. And so people who lead you to make assumptions are basically leading you to make an assumption so that you don't find the answer. But God doesn't ask you to make an assumption, and he asks you a question sometimes when the question is asked him, because when you are asked a question, you seek your own brain, which leads you back into your own understanding to search it out, because maybe you already have the answer. But it also leads you to seek what? Intuition. So God, even though he's standing in front of you, can answer you without moving his mouth. So it's much more beneficial for you if you integrate the answer into your understanding by way of seeking it through your own thought processes, than if I just give it to you and hand you the answer. So they've often attributed this to like a Socratic method, where answering a question or asking a question is a more powerful way of teaching than answering one, because it leads you to more attentively seek the answer and therefore record it more deeply. So, is it Socratic? Well, let's not say that Socrates didn't use it, but it certainly didn't originate with him, because all artisans draw from God anyway. Human beings draw from God, that's reasonable. So we won't take that from Socrates if people want to remember it by him, but God most certainly is the one who does that. He is our intuition. Otherwise, how could artists draw from him if he's not actively involved in our innate natural abilities, but also our ongoing implementation of inwardly sought knowledge? So intuition says there's a tutor within you, doesn't it? It says there's a tutor within you. Well, if there's a tutor within you, who is that tutor? That's God. So God is what? Tutoring you from within. And he's also giving you conscience, which is knowledge. Science, conscience. A human being comes with a level of innate moral knowledge. knowledge as to what is expected of him behaviourally. How does he know this? Some people would say, well, it's evolutionary, because we just found that we could help the race to survive if we didn't all kill each other. Well, why not kick a puppy then, but kill a cow and eat it? So the point I'm making is that's not explained away by evolutionary processes. Somebody might say, well, there's not much meat on a puppy, if they're trying to be funny. But the point is that we're not just mindless, do it because it's the most evolutionarily sound progression. We know innately, even if we've never met or had a discussion about the morality of kicking puppies in front of children, we know that that's wrong and can agree upon that, having never had a prior discussion on the subject. How? Because innately we're image bearers of God, made upright in our parts, and we have conscience that God gives us. So we do know these things. So God, knowing that He's both standing in front of us and tutoring us cosmically by Spirit, and that He created us innately as upright creatures and knows everything about us, knows how to ask us a question so that we'll seek understanding inwardly. So if you ask me a question, you say, where's this at? And I return the question, but rephrase it in a way that incorporates some of the knowledge you already have, knowing that if you continue to seek based upon the knowledge you have, you'll also find the answer you sought. So I just point you in the right direction in your already recorded understanding. So that's not sort of being tricky or just refusing to answer the question. It is answering the question in a way that only God can, inwardly. Only God can answer a question by counsel directly inside of you, by tutoring you through His Spirit, through your connection to the one that is life. Only He can do that, because He is the pool of knowledge. So it's just because we're somewhat inexperienced as human beings, we're not living in the world very long before we have to hit the ground running and we're under attack. Pion-pions from left and right. So we have to get running. So God is counselling us through that as well. You see, He is. So it makes sense that God, knowing He can both answer a question in front of you and lead you to your own understanding, why wouldn't He favour the one that is going to encourage you to continue seeking knowledge by setting your feet on the right path of knowledge seeking, by asking you a question instead of answering it in a way that you give a man a fish instead of a fishing rod? Because if I give you the answer and not the ability to seek answers, I'm sort of paralyzing you. So it's much better, therefore, to learn to seek knowledge. And that's what the devil doesn't want. The devil wants to hand you all the answers he wants you to have and to hide the seeking of knowledge. So anybody who's critically thinking and seeking knowledge, he tries to get them in his camp early on. You see now? So that's why God would lead you to seeking knowledge. That's why he tells us as his saints, study to show yourself approved. Now, is this saying, I'm a right lad altogether, I'm good, I can judge myself now? No. It's saying that based upon the Word of God, we know whether we're being obedient or not. Well, currently the government in Ireland are leading you to a position where you can't know whether you're being obedient or not, if you're to listen to what they tell you. Because they're not telling you, seek knowledge of the law by reading it. But that's what Jesus is telling us. Study to show thyself approved. Study my word to know if you're in obedience. Study the Constitution of Ireland to know if you're obeying the law. They're telling you, assume that what we're telling you is lawful. God himself didn't say that. He said, study to show thyself approved. So only the devil would say the other. Because he's what? The opposite of the Word of God. So wherever he can manifest the opposite of the Word of God in human living, he will. God says, study the law to know it. Satan says, presumptively constitutional. Presumptively means there's no evidence. God said, study the evidence. Satan said, there is no evidence. Presumptively constitutional says, presume that this is the law. Jesus said, study to be sure it is. So presumptively constitutional is the devil. Because he's an opposite hider. He's a snake in the grass, spouting the opposite of the word of God while he hides in people all around you. His spirit. He hides his spirit in the people all around you. He's running through them. Like a cosmic spirit, he can be Anne and then Barry and then Philip and then Mary as you walk along the road. If they're children of disobedience. Jesus said Satan is the spirit operating in the children of disobedience. That's what the Lord said. So if there's a child of disobedience in government, which is highly likely, because Satan is the god of the world and places these people, then eventually, when they've pulled enough wool over enough eyes, and enough guys who know the law die, because they just get old and die, and they don't pass on their knowledge, because people think, oh, the old fogies. What do they know anyway? How to put their dentures in? So, obviously that's a great loss to society, because these are people who've had a lifetime of experience. So instead of seeking that experience, people are now going into a state of decay where they don't have knowledge of how society should function and how it functions best. Unless, of course, they're operating like witches and wizards in a coven, then it's different, because they're looking after each other. You see how it works? So if Jesus says, study to show thyself approved, and Michael D. Higgins, the president, says, presumptively constitutional, you don't think there's a disconnect between the wisest person in existence and your current president? Ignorance of the law is no excuse, but you should certainly know it. That's why Jesus said, study the law to show yourself approved, because ignorance of it will not be an excuse on the day of judgment. He didn't say that verbatim. He said, study to show thyself approved. But ignorance of the law, in-depth knowledge of it, will not be an excuse on the day of judgment. Just like you wouldn't get away with robbing a post office for claiming you didn't know you shouldn't do it. So why would your government or a policeman or anybody ever lead you to ignorance? Because it's only going to work against you. Because it's not seen as an excuse. So therefore there's no benefit to ignorance. Not even with getting away with something because you didn't know. So why would those who are custodians of the very Constitution of Ireland, which means it's their job to keep it and so that everybody can know it, why would they tell people to presume things constitutional? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Study to show thyself approved. Presumptively constitutional. So the one whose job it is to uphold the Constitution of Ireland is what? What's he saying? Don't know your law. Just do what I tell you. Basically. Do you know what presumptively means? It's an interchangeable or synonymous or similar term as assumption. Presumption, assumption. These mean the same thing. So what is an assumption? An assumption is when you lack evidence to confirm something. You make an assumption. So again, when you lack evidence to confirm something, you make an assumption. Okay, let's look at that. Let's look at the theory behind that. Do I lack evidence of the Holy Bible? No, I have it in my hand. It's the Holy Bible. Do I lack evidence of Psalm 137? No, there it is. There's Psalm 137. Don't lack evidence about it because there it is. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat down. Yeah, we wept when we remembered Zion. I can't lack evidence of it. What it says, can I? I can't lack evidence of what it says because it's right in front of me. What it says is right there. Can I make an assumption on what it says then? No, by definition I can't. I cannot make an assumption on something that's written down. It's there. So now imagine this is the Constitution of Ireland. If I have that in my hand, can I make an assumption? No. I have it in my hand. Constitution of Ireland under the family. And I can go and I can check and I can read it and it'll say, the government must endeavour to ensure that it never be as a matter of economic necessity that a woman leaves the house and goes to work. You better pay the husband enough then. Yeah, we have a name for that. It's called gainful employment. Where you pay the man enough so the woman doesn't have to go to work, so she can mind the children and the devil doesn't get his hands on them. Or his words in their ears. Through Mrs. Crashington. So through Mrs. Crashington, the devil gets in there. So now this is why we have what? Evidence of what the Constitution is. Why? So that we can say, here, government, you're not doing it properly. Why else would you write it down? Well, so the government can know what it is, right? Yeah, but also so we can know what it is. So everybody can know what it is. So what do we the people? Oh, we the people for the people. So we the people write the Constitution and we give it to the government and we say, well, uphold that Constitution there for us, will you? Uphold that Constitution for the people of Ireland there, Michael D. Higgins. Michael, will you be custodian of the Constitution of Ireland? Yeah, I'll do that. I'm your president. I'll be the custodian of the Constitution of Ireland. What's that? Custodian. When you have custody of something, you protect it. It's your job to take care, to preserve, to uphold, to protect. You have them in your custody. You've adopted that responsibility. You've been charged with it. You are now the custodian. Just like you might have custody or guardianship of somebody, of a person. You can have custody and guardianship of the Constitution as well. An inanimate. Because it's so important to the common good and to maintaining the integrity of that society, the welfare of the society, the good of the people. So if you're to maintain the good of the people as the president, you have to uphold the Constitution of Ireland as an Irish man. Right? So as the Irish president, your job is to take Bunreacht na hÉireann, which is the Irish for the Irish Constitution, which is another term for the written law of the land. It's your job to be custodian of that and take it from this generation and give it to the next generation. So from me to my daughter, or from my granddad to her daughter, it must go through the presidents, and they'll hand it on like a relay baton. You know, at your sports day, you're doing the relay race. You hand the baton from one lad to the next. That's how that works. So like a relay race, they'll relay it to the next president and he'll relay it to the next. So that's why we write it down, so we don't forget. And so that we can, as the people of Ireland, be sure that we know what we're expecting our president and the government to do, and what we pay them to do and what their responsibilities are, so that we can hold them accountable to it and make sure that they're doing the job properly. Because it doesn't make sense that you're paying somebody to not do a job. You pay them to do the job and then you make sure the job was done. Well, how are you going to do that? So, much like the Lord God has said, study to show thyself approved, we need to study to show our government approved. So how can we study the Constitution to know our government are doing the job properly if we don't have it? And how can we have it if we're only presuming it? Do you see? So, an assumption or a presumption, the same meaning, is when you lack evidence of something. But we don't lack evidence of the Constitution. So we should never be told by our government to presume something constitutional, or any court or any policeman or any president. Shouldn't ever happen. And if it does, they're committing a crime. Because we, the people of Ireland, give them the Constitution so that they know what it is. It's not for them to take the Constitution off and go, thank you, and then you say, okay, so tell me what the Constitution is, and they say, just presume that everything we tell you heretofore is the Constitution that you handed us. Okay? Anything we say now, you presume it is the Constitution. But what do you mean? We have to know what is constitutional. How else will we know if we're making all these assumptions? Did Jesus say to us, make lots of assumptions to show yourself approved? Now that'd be nonsense. Can you imagine a referee of a game of football saying, just presume everything I say are the rules of soccer. Well, you're not going to tell us before we start the game? We need to know the rules before we engage the sport. How else can you expect me to obey them? So you learn them in training. You study them and you read them, and your trainer, your coach, tells you what they are. It's not reasonable that he wouldn't tell you. Unless he's looking for a reason to give out to you when you get them wrong in front of everybody. So it makes sense that you would tell somebody in advance. How else can I engage the sport with the etiquette and the ethos and the respect and the honour that it deserves and the other people engaging the sport deserve if you don't tell me the rules first? But you treat me like an idiot and tell me to just presume everything you say is the rules. That's not reasonable. That's not a logical sequence. It's not reasonable conduct. We say to the President, be the implementer of the Constitution of Ireland and do not offend it in any part when you legislate. How does he do that if he's not going to check whether the legislature is constitutional or not? If he's not going to go... So somebody hands him a bill, right? He has the bill here and he has the Constitution here. And he's very well learned. He knows his stuff about the Constitution. He's well learned in constitutional law. Maybe in Trinity or something, perhaps. And he studies constitutional law and then he becomes president because he knows the rules. And then it's his job when somebody hands him a bill. They hand him the bill, he reads the bill and he tests it for its constitutionality. He compares it to the Constitution and sees if it goes against it. For example, you are not allowed to run ahead of a pass behind the defenders when you're playing the game of soccer. That's called offside. So you're not allowed to pass the line of defenders, the last defender back, closest to the goalie, before the guy who's passing the ball to you kicks it. Or you're offside. Okay, now I know. So if something in the bill that's given to the President says, you must run past the last defender before the man kicks the ball, you say, no, I know that's not the case because I was told the rules. And the President will say, that goes against the rules. It cannot be added. It goes against the rules? Yeah. Why does it go against the rules? Because you're supposed to wait till, as again, you're supposed to wait till they pass the ball before you run behind the defender to collect the pass. Oh, so that's the opposite then. You can't have that because that'll go against the rules we already have. You can't have that because you're supposed to uphold the rules. But then they told the President, who's custodian of the Constitution of Ireland, you don't have to do that anymore, okay? Well, you don't have to check whether the rules are the rules or whether anything's going against the rules. Are they serious? Are they actually serious? Are they actually serious? So this is what they do. They say, just presume that everything I say to you now is the law. Presumptively lawful. What, you don't have to check? No. They said I don't have to check as president anymore. You don't have to check. Hold on a second. President is custodian of the Constitution. They are the person that upholds the law. They're the one that implements the law. They're the one that ensures that nothing is written into the legislature that goes against the law, which is the Constitution. So it goes against the Constitution. But they're telling the president now he doesn't have to check if things that he's adding in go against the law, which is his job to do. So they're telling the president he doesn't have to do his job anymore. Yeah. And they're still paying him? Yeah. But they still claim that he's custodian of the Constitution? Yeah. But effectively he's not? Yeah. But not only that, now he's telling the people to fight against their own laws, as though what he has added to the legislature is lawful, even though he didn't check. Yeah. So that's like the ref adding stuff to the rules that go against the rules. Yeah. Like, for example, you cannot be offside. You can be offside. Presume that's the rules. You can, hang on a second, I'll repeat this. These are the rules, and I'm here to uphold them. You cannot be offside. You can be offside. Presume that that's the rules. I am upholder of the rules. My teeth are sharp. So, I am the upholder of the rules, one of which is you cannot be offside. You cannot be behind the last defender back closest to the goalie prior to the passer of the ball kicking it. Yes, you can. Presume that's the rules. What, don't you have to actually check? They tell me no. They tell me no. Who does? Somebody tell that man to get a job and then don't give him one. There's lots of this. Preacher man, exposing stuff. So, the Constitution of Ireland is the written law of the land. Can we lack evidence as to what it is? Nope. Well, why are they telling us to presume things constitutional? Me know not. Me no think this makes sense. Presumptively, what's that mean? Presumptively means lacking evidence to confirm. Do we lack evidence to confirm what is and what isn't constitutional? No, it's called the Constitution. You mean the Constitution is the evidence? Yeah. It's the evidence of itself? Go figure. So, if you go figure and you find that that doesn't make any sense, you'd be correct. The Constitution is the written law of the land. Therefore, it is self-evidenced. So you can't presume something constitutional by definition of the word presumption. So the term presumptively constitutional is a contradiction in terms. That's the devil. Sir, just presume everything that I say now is the law, okay? Is anybody looking? Anybody give out? Anybody say anything? No, just ignore the lads that do, okay? And then anybody, just wait till they die off. Wasn't it great? In 1798, loads of pikemen died and all, and soldiers and all, for our freedoms. Yeah, we'll put up a statue. 1939, what did they do? They enact the Constitution of Ireland, one of the best constitutions ever written. And then what did they do? Systematically unpack it and fail to implement it. Systematically they took it apart, deconstructed it, amended it, brainwashed the people into voting against what was the preservation of their own household. Basically. So the President of Ireland is supposed to uphold the Constitution of this land, and then he tells us to presume things constitutional, which is very dangerous, because he's actually telling us to consider lawful that which he hasn't bothered to confirm when it's his job to confirm it. There is no bigger crime. A president can't commit a bigger crime than that. He can't. A president cannot commit a bigger crime than telling people to presume things constitutional. Yet the term presumptively constitutional has been written into legislature in this country. Are you understanding? So, that's the devil. So, the devil goes against the word of God and his servants. So you can draw the necessary corollaries there. The President of Ireland is doing the will of the devil, because God teaches study to show thyself approved, and they teach presume whatever I say is lawful, even though you can take it that I didn't check. But this goes beyond that, because the claim is that there's no evidence, because you only make presumptions on the lack of evidence. So the President is basically saying, I will no longer be custodian of your Constitution. The President who you're paying to be custodian of the Constitution has admitted that he is no longer willing to do that job by telling you to presume things constitutional. And that's an admission of guilt. That term in and of itself is an admission of guilt. You can't hide it. You can't conceal it. President, how do you uphold that which you can't evidence? And how can you uphold that which you're not giving the people certainty on? How can you uphold what you're not giving people certainty on? And how can you uphold that which you claim is not evidenced? You can't. You can't uphold something that there's no evidence of. So it's the president's job, his primary function actually, to be custodian of the Constitution, yet he's telling the people to basically obey in ignorance and presume what he's saying and what he's enacting as legislature is constitutional, whilst he's claiming he didn't bother to check because he doesn't have to. Now, what president in his right mind would make the claim that he doesn't have to check what's constitutional as custodian of the Constitution? That's like the opposite. Saying one thing, doing the opposite. I will be custodian of the Constitution. Presumptively constitutional. Nobody said it. I think I go away with that one, lads. Presumptively constitutional, guys. Can you imagine a preacher going out and saying, I'm not sure whether this is the Bible because I didn't check, but just pretend it is. Presume it is. That's why God said, let God be true and every man a liar. Study to show thyself approved. That's why we write things down as men, because men are corrupt. And instead of implementing the will of God or the will of the people, they will implement the will of themselves or their friends down the cabal in Freemasonry or the devil. So it's either the will of God or the will of the devil. Only two. Only two ruling wills. God's, Satan's. Satan's the god of the world. God is the God of gods. See the point? So you're either implementing one will or another. The will of you is either in line with God's or it isn't, and if it isn't in line with God's, it's in line with the devil's. You see the point? So your current president is working on the side of Satan. It's not surprising, being that he's a Freemason that agrees with same-sex marriage. It's not complicated. But that's one thing. The other thing is, we hand him the Constitution of Ireland as custodian, and now he's telling us to just do things whatever they say as though they were constitutional. That's crime. That's called the crime of treason or the crime of sedition. It's actually both. Sedition is treason, but treason doesn't necessarily have to be sedition. It can just be a betrayal of the state. Whereas sedition is actually the overthrowing of the state. Now, how about we come up with a way of overthrowing the state without having to do so physically? Let's figure out a way of overthrowing the government, the effectiveness of it, and the Constitution, but not have to actually physically lift a finger, but to wiggle a pen. That's what they're doing. So they write these terms in that they cleverly think out and use words as long as they can find for that purpose that most people don't use on a daily basis, like presumptively constitutional. What could that possibly mean to most people? Most people haven't read the Constitution. So it's not really a difficult task for them in our day. So presumptively means what? Again, to make an assumption. Assumption means what? We lack evidence. Why would the one who's the keeper of the evidence claim there's a lack of it? The president is the keeper of the evidence, yet he's claiming there's a lack of evidence? Problem. Imagine you hand the Constitution to the president and he goes, "What Constitution?" "So you are custodian of the Constitution." "What Constitution?" That's what presumptively constitutional says. Do you see how they operate? They don't go, "What Constitution?" because you might get on the scent. They do it a different way. They do it trickily, with wordage, verbiage. In the writings, in the wiggle of the quill. So the devil favours to kill with the quill. Less messy. And it doesn't get as much heads raised. So, like, huh? What's happening? Raised eyebrows, huh? They want to avoid that. When people's heads are stuck in their phone, they're much less likely to be looking up out over the, the trench to see what's coming. So the point is that presumptively constitutional is basically the president cleverly hiding that he's claiming there is no evidence. That evidence which he is supposed to be the custodian of. He said, "I'm custodian of the evidence which there is a lack of." I mean, you couldn't write this stuff. "I'm custodian of the Constitution which I lack. So just presume everything I say is the Constitution which I lack evidence of. Presumptively constitutional." That's what it's like. Do you know, like that puppet that goes, "I kill you." Little skeleton fella. That's what it's like. It's mad. Because a demon comes in, uses them as a puppet, and they go, blah, 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 blah. And something crazy. Upside down, back to front, inside out, and opposed to anything that makes any sense, ever. The Constitution is written. It's evidenced. So you can't make any presumptions on it. Not lawfully or logically. And the law should reflect logic, right? So when the Constitution of Ireland is in the possession, the custody of a man who's claiming it isn't evidenced, then you've got a serious problem. That's mad, like. Sure, that's mad, not. Presumptively constitutional. It's like running through a minefield. Something a madman says before he runs into a minefield. Do you know what I mean? Like the last thing he says before he runs into a known minefield. Presumptively constitutional! And then he runs in, blows up. Except the president brings the entire country into the minefield with him. Because he's supposed to uphold the Constitution. You see? Says My job is to make sure that the law you give me is implemented by this government. There's no evidence of the law you give me. So instead of all that, just presume that everything I say from my friendies is lawful. My friendies tell me what to put in, and I put it in. And then I say, just presume it's constitutional because I didn't check. But isn't it your job to check? Yeah, but I didn't. Why? Because they tell me I don't have to. Who does? The same people that give you this stuff that isn't lawful to put into the legislature? Yeah. My friendies. Those people who get you to commit sedition and treason and put your head in the block in that way, I don't think you could call them friendies. That's not friendly. Ah, come on, Michael D, cute little fella, who's going to suspect him? Like, don't be so mean to Michael D. Everything they do is strategic to manipulate. It's witchcraft. So, yes, he's a cute old man, but the point is, he's committing sedition. The Constitution of Ireland is to be upheld by him. Why isn't it being? In fact, he's claiming there's a lack of evidence as to what it is. But it can't be both. I'm going to uphold the Constitution of this land. Don't know what it is. But just pretend like what I'm saying is it. And you better. Because that means you have to consider it the law. Might put you in jail if you don't pretend this is lawful. It's mental. They're mental. It's mental. It's gone mental. All mental. Mental. It's mad, like. It's like somebody closed down St. Senan's and put them all in government. For the effectiveness of the implementation of the stratagems known to work. It's like people with psychological impediments have been put in there and have difficulties with logical corollaries where they can't say, well, that's the same as that. Or that doesn't go against that. Some people struggle like that. But these men are supposed to be the intelligentsia. We got big numbers in our tests we got. So they're supposed to know, because they'll tell you that. Yes, I passed with A's through Trinity. Well, why does that have you not doing your job right then? Yes, I passed with flying colours at the highest level of academic achievement, and I can't even get the basics of logic right. It's just not acceptable. It's sedition. It's sedition, guys. It's treason. They know what they're doing. They're intelligent people. They're not fools, and they're not mad in the sense that they're clinically insane. They know that what they're doing is harmful. So they're murderous. If they're implementing something that is known to be detrimental to the common good, or not implementing that which is good, upholding the common good, which is the same thing, their intentions are murderous. Because when you attack the common good, you leave people spiritually and societally vulnerable to moral attack. to spiritual attack, which is not only loss of the physical body, but loss of the soul in hell. So there'd be something wrong with me if I wasn't getting angry. Like, I'm using a bit of humour and a bit of salt here as a preserve, because I've been doing this a long time. So I have to keep myself sort of preserved with a bit of salt or a bit of humour from time to time. But this is a very serious matter. This is treason. It's a sedition. It's the worst crime that a government can commit against its people. To lead them to ignorant compliance of that which is against their constitution under threat of imprisonment. That's what presumptively constitutional means. Very serious. It's telling people to presume things lawful. That's very serious. Presume them lawful? Can we not know they're lawful, please? That'd be better. That's the very job of the president. To make known the law to the government, and to not let anything pass that isn't lawful. That's his job. They told me I don't have to do my job, but I still get paid. What? Can you imagine standing in O'Brien's saying, I don't make coffees or sandwiches, but I get paid? What? Why, what do you do, the dishes? No, I just stand here. And tell people I work for O'Brien's. And then I put poison in the sandwiches. Because when you tell somebody to presume something constitutional, you're poisoning the system. It's sedition, it's overthrow. You're adding poison into the mix, because you're telling people to obey things that actually fight against that which is good for the body or the collective of society. So metaphorically, like, society is the body of the people. It's the nation, which is the collective. It's just the people, like. So when you put something that's detrimental to the people, it's like poisoning them. So, yes, I'm the president that doesn't do president stuff while I'm poisoning everybody. By writing stuff in to the legislature which actually goes against the common good. That's number one enemy of state, is the very guy tasked with upholding the Constitution. It's like the bank manager robbing the bank. He has the easiest access to do it because he's the most trusted and always has the keys. And gets closest to the money. So he went, yeah, I won't be there tomorrow. Oh, what a great day to rob the bank. And Mary's on there on her own, she's new. Oh, perfect, I'll go in and rob the bank then. So the one who's closest to the bank, most trusted, can actually do it most harm. That's why he needs to be most trusted. Because he can help others to break in. That's why they say, militarily, we defeat them, we defeat the opposition by leading the opposition. We defeat the Irish by leading the Irish. Why? Because we lead them against themselves. We turn them into lemmings. We get the pikeman to fall on his own pike. We get them to self-destruct in willful, ignorant compliance. Willfully ignorant compliance. Because your government are telling you to stay ignorant, presumptively constitutional. But they go a step further than that. They say, stay ignorant but pretend you're not, and just do whatever we tell you and pretend that you know that what we're telling you doesn't fight against your own laws. So it's like saying to the pikeman, stick the pike in your own stomach and pretend you didn't. And you better do it in case you go to jail. You see the level it's at now? The level of corruption it's at? Serious stuff, isn't it? Very serious. Very serious. Sedition. It's the worst crime anybody can commit against their own country, because it is the overthrow of its government. Now, overthrowing the government can be done without physical violence. You know that, right? It can be done with the pen, by legislating things that go against its laws and its people and their rights and the common good, which is what they're doing. So I've exposed it, my hands are clean, but I will continue to, so long as I can. Blessings in Jesus' name. A holy kiss.